Welcome to Know This Live. I'm Zinhle Essamuah. Today, I will be speaking with Representative Jahana Hayes. The Congresswoman from Connecticut is a former high school teacher who went on to become the National Teacher of the Year and is now in her second term. Representative Hayes, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Zinhle, for having me.
Obviously, it's 2021. We've got a new administration, the Biden administration, and you've said in the past that you're not sure if President Biden's COVID-19 relief bill does enough for K through 12 education. What needs to be done to move us forward? What do you wish to see?
Well, I'm actually excited that the Biden administration is at least prioritizing K-12 education and the reopening of schools safely. I think one of the things that we saw in the past was that there were calls to open schools, but really no comprehensive plan for what that would look like. I'd like to see not only vaccinations for education professionals, teachers, secretaries, custodians, everyone who's in the setting, but a comprehensive testing plan. I'd like to see them classified as essential workers. I also would like to make sure that districts have the money for personal protective equipment and sanitizing of school buildings. As a classroom teacher myself, I know that oftentimes educators are the ones who would be purchasing those supplies. So that needs to be built into any plan moving forward. I also believe that there needs to be a plan for if there's an outbreak. What do you do right in that moment so that districts are not trying to decide on the fly? There should be a comprehensive plan for if there's an outbreak. Teachers know what is expected, what they do, how to close schools if that's necessary. And if schools do have to be closed, making sure that all students are connected digitally, that they have devices, and that teachers have professional development on how to teach virtually. All of those things, I think, need to happen and need to be a part of any plan to make sure that not only students are safe, but teachers and faculty and the community at large are also safe.
Yeah, and your interest and obviously involvement in education has expanded to your committee involvement. I know that you're on the House Education Committee, which has been the center of a lot of attention recently, specifically because of Republican Representative and conspiracy theorist Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was put on that committee. You've sponsored a resolution to strip her of that. Why must she be removed? Dig into that for us.
Well, the letter that I led now has 130 co-sponsors. Representative Greene forfeited her right to engage in good faith policy discussion on this committee. I focused on her comments about the Sandy Hook massacre and calling it a false flag and students as actors. This happened in my community. Educators every day are standing in front of kids trying to assure them that schools are safe spaces. And this committee is tasked with trauma-informed practices, with school climate and physical environments. If we have someone on the committee who we have to first prove that these things are even happening, how can we work together as a body to come up with solutions? Representative, while I respect the fact that the people in Georgia sent her to Congress, this is not the appropriate committee for her. And I don't understand how Leader McCarthy could have selected her to be the Republican representative or one of the Republican representatives on this committee that is tasked with school safety.
And in these conversations, we can all often get caught up in the policy and forget about the people. I know you referenced that you represent the area of Newtown, Connecticut. What have you heard from your constituents and people? What is the impact when they hear these conspiracy theories about these mass school shootings that happened in their hometown?
They're re-traumatized over and over and over again. I spoke to parents in the last couple days, and I was reminded of the fact that this community, we had folks like Alex Jones and conspiracy theorists who really kept coming at them and berating them. And really, when we have parents now inviting Representative Taylor Greene to their child's gravesite to prove that should not be happening. That should not be happening. This community has been traumatized over and over and over again. But I also represent educators. And like I said, there are so many teachers who are doing lockdown drills, who are standing in front of kids, trying to keep their composure and assuring them that the adults have your safety at heart. They're trying to do everything they can to make sure that school is a safe place for you. All of those people feel utterly betrayed by this committee assignment.
And Representative Greene has pushed back on your resolution, saying that it could set a dangerous precedent. We've heard from Democrats as well who've said this might backfire, and GOP members, or Democrats who are concerned that GOP members might use this in the future to oust Democrats. What do you say to that critique?
Well, first of all, the precedent has already been set, and it was set by House Republicans when they removed Steve King and stripped him of his committee assignments. Listen, in Congress, we have the responsibility to discipline our own members for behavior. And that's not about precedent. That is something that I think should be, if this were a Democratic member espousing these same types of conspiracy theories and saying these things, I would have led a letter in that regard as well. It's not because Representative Taylor Greene is a Republican. It's because of her comments and her actions. So if I were sitting in the House and a Democratic member did the same thing, you could expect a similar type of letter from me.
And I'm mindful that your advocacy around education has not been specific just to this recent issue with Representative Greene. You've identified Connecticut as one of the most educationally segregated areas in the country. Obviously, we know that COVID-19 has really heightened a lot of inequities. What are you doing to combat these disparities that are emerging specifically in the educational system?
Right. I've spoken a lot about, I represent a district that has some of the most exclusive boarding schools in the world and some of the lowest performing schools. And there's a large equity gap. And I think that really is what we have to speak to when we're talking about public education. Parents should not have to find a school halfway across the state to send their kid to because the school across the street from their house is crumbling. I introduced the Save Education Jobs Act to make sure that when districts are faced with shrinking budgets, they don't have to cut things like social workers and library media specialists and all of the wraparound services that students receive at school to support them in their education. Last year on our committee, we marked up the school infrastructure bill to make sure that these crumbling infrastructure and the digital divide is addressed. Also, we need to invest more money in childcare so that when kids come into the school setting, they're already prepared, that they have some foundation for learning. All of those things need to happen to make our kids ready for success. And I think just recently, actually this week, we are marking up a National Apprenticeship Act because post-secondary education in college is not the only pathway to success. I had many students in my class who could have benefited from a technical education, job training, skills training. We have to give kids every available option to help them be successful and self-sustaining.
Yeah, and I'm mindful as you speak about students that you were very outspoken against the Trump administration's efforts to strip funding from states that recognize trans students in athletics. We know they use Title IX in their defense. How do you plan to stand against this now, considering that a lot of your Republican colleagues are still pushing this forward?
Listen, I can't. My approach doesn't change. For me, I recognize discrimination when I see it. And we have a responsibility as educators, as legislators, to make sure that students are not discriminated in school and that they have access to all opportunities. It's unfortunate that my Republican colleagues don't see that or don't understand that, but I've actually been in a school and had to support students who were struggling with their own identity and looking for a safe space to learn. That's our job. It doesn't matter their sexual identity, their religion, their race, their ethnicity. Every student who shows up in our classrooms deserves access to educational opportunities, even transgender students. And I will continue to be an outspoken advocate to speak up for them because they don't have a voice and they need for legislators to understand their own experiences.
Yeah, and the work on Capitol Hill has been front and center, especially after the month of January where we saw the Capitol riot on January 6th. And I want to talk about that with you, right? You were with your 12-year-old son. You went live on social media to say that you were safe, but you did get choked up in the video. What was running through your mind?
We will get through this.
My son was scared, and I didn't have answers for him. And I realized that I had never really thought about my safety on this campus in a real way. I had never considered that this might be a place that wasn't safe. When I was Teacher of the Year, I did a lot of travel to Africa, and I remember being in Tunisia, where the Libyan embassy was in exile, and there was this huge military presence, and me just being aware of my surroundings. that's how I felt on January 6th, being aware of my surroundings and not really sure of what to tell my son. He kept pulling up clips and he's showing me on the phone and he's like, Mom, they're climbing up the walls. And I'm saying, turn off the phone, it's okay. But at the same time telling him, get away from the windows, be quiet. But I also remembered, again, educators every day are having lockdown drills, are experiencing this type of trauma. We have to have a real response to increased violence in this country, to this type of rhetoric, to white supremacy, to all of the things that we've seen, because this is not appropriate. What we saw on January 6th, and to have no action or no response to that, to simply move on, is really, that's a non-starter. That's not anything we can do. We have to, first of all, figure out why it happened, how it happened, and then take every step possible to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
And we know that the effects of January 6th are still rippling today. We've seen people of color, other representatives, talk about how triggered they have been since the event. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently shared her experience. What was your take on that, and have you felt similarly?
I absolutely understand what Representative Ocasio-Cortez was talking about, and I know for sure that if that angry mob had found her on that day, it would not have ended well. So everyone needs to have a true appreciation for that. Again, when I walk to the floor to vote, I am now looking around, taking in my surroundings. I am aware of which members I'm around and don't feel safe around those members. I've seen members of Congress refuse to go through metal detectors. I've seen them yelling at Capitol Police and floor staff. I've seen them yelling at the House physician and refusing to put on a mask. That is not what this body is about. And if we wouldn't tolerate in any other workplace where employees felt unsafe. We would do everything in our power to make sure that that didn't happen. I should not have to feel unsafe to represent the people in my district. I've had to increase security at my district office, at my personal residence at home. I am much more aware of where I am and making sure that I have someone with me. Those should not be concerns in order to do this work.
And all that you're touching on, right? This racial reckoning we've been facing in the country, the threats of domestic terrorism. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm mindful that you yourself survived COVID-19. What's your message to people watching right now and who are just overwhelmed or wondering how will we move forward as a country?
The thing is, one of your greatest tools as an educator is reflection. And while many people are thinking of next steps, I think we need to learn every lesson that we can from the events of the last year. This is a blueprint for how to move forward. We cannot take the ostrich approach and just put our heads in the sand. We have to have some really honest, really difficult conversations. We have to acknowledge the disparities, whether it be in our education system and our healthcare system. We have to recognize that race is still a persistent and a pervasive issue in this country. And then we have to sit down and work together towards solutions. This idea that these things don't exist or trying to prove that it's not as bad as people once thought it was, I think the last year has taught us that it is as bad and possibly even worse than we were willing to admit. But we have a unique opportunity. We have a mandate from the people who sent us here to address these things in a real and authentic way and work towards solutions. And not just talk about it, to make real investments in closing these equity gaps, to work with the current administration, to work within our legislative body, to put laws in place to make sure that we do not become complacent and these types of things go unchecked even more.
Well, Representative Hayes, it's clear that there's a lot of work in front of you. I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, stay safe, stay well, and thank you to everyone tuning in. Again, this has been Zinhle Essamuah with KnowThis Live. We'll see you next time.